Bound Sound Shop, the music store that lost its voice. In 1971, when vinyl records dominated the music landscape and the compact disc was still a decade away from commercial reality, Jerry Solomon opened the first sound shop in Portland, Oregon. What began as a modest 800-square-foot storefront would eventually grow into a regional powerhouse with over 180 locations across the Pacific Northwest, California, and parts of the Mountain West. Solomon, a former radio DJ who understood the pulse of music culture, envisioned more than just another record store. He wanted to create a destination where music lovers could discover new artists, dig through extensive catalogs, and engage with knowledgeable staff who shared their passion. The original sound shop featured listening stations where customers could preview albums before purchasing, a revolutionary concept that set the chain apart from department stores and other retailers who treated records as mere commodities. By 1975, Sound Shop had expanded to 12 locations, each carefully curated to reflect local musical tastes, while maintaining the company's commitment to deep catalog selection and customer service. The 1970s and early 1980s represented Sound Shop's golden era, as the chain rode the wave of vinyl's popularity and the emerging album-oriented rock culture. The company's buyers were legendary within the industry for their ability to spot trends and stock hard-to-find imports, bootlegs, and independent releases that larger chains ignored. Sound Shop stores typically carried over 40,000 different titles, compared to the 5,000 to 8,000 found at most department store music sections. The chain's New Music Tuesday promotions became cultural events in many cities, with lines of customers waiting for the latest releases from major labels like Warner Brothers, Columbia, and Atlantic Records. Sound Shop's import section was particularly renowned, featuring rare pressings from Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom that attracted serious collectors willing to pay premium prices. The company's relationship with distributors was so strong that they often received advance copies of albums, allowing them to host exclusive listening parties for highly anticipated releases. By 1982, Sound Shop had grown to 78 locations and employed over 1,200 people, making it one of the largest independent music retailers in the western United States. The introduction of compact discs in 1982 initially seemed like a blessing for Sound Shop. The new format carried higher profit margins than vinyl, and the chain's early adoption of CD technology gave them a significant advantage over slower-moving competitors. Sound Shop invested heavily in CD inventory and player demonstrations, often dedicating entire sections of their stores to the new digital format. The company's technical expertise became a selling point, as their staff could explain the benefits of digital audio to skeptical customers still attached to their turntables. However, the transition period from vinyl to CD also marked the beginning of several strategic missteps that would eventually contribute to the chain's downfall. Sound Shop management made the decision to rapidly phase out vinyl in favor of CDs, alienating longtime customers who weren't ready to make the switch and missing the continuing demand for records among DJs, collectors, and younger music fans. By 1986, vinyl represented less than 15% of Sound Shop's inventory, compared to 40% just 2 years earlier. This decision proved particularly damaging in cities like Seattle and Portland, where independent music scenes continued to embrace vinyl as their preferred format. The late 1980s brought new challenges as major retail chains like Tower Records, Sam Goody, and Musicland began aggressive expansion into Sound Shop's core markets. These competitors had advantages that Sound Shop couldn't match: massive buying power that allowed for lower wholesale prices, extensive advertising budgets, and the ability to sustain losses in specific markets while building market share. Tower Records, in particular, posed an existential threat with their enormous stores carrying over 100,000 titles and their famous "No Music is Forbidden" slogan. Sound Shop's response was to expand rapidly, opening 47 new locations between 1987 and 1991. But this growth strategy stretched the company's resources thin and diluted the personal service that had been their trademark. Many of the new Sound Shop locations were placed in shopping malls where rent was high and the atmosphere was generic, abandoning the street-level, neighborhood-focused approach that had built their reputation. The company also began carrying more mainstream inventory to compete with the chains, reducing their selection of independent and import titles that had differentiated them from mass-market retailers. Employee training suffered as the rapid expansion made it difficult to maintain the knowledgeable staff culture that customers expected from Sound Shop. SoundShop's problems intensified in the early 1990s as the music retail landscape became increasingly brutal. The rise of big-box retailers like Best Buy and Circuit City created a new category of competition that treated music as a loss leader to drive traffic for higher-margin electronics. These stores could sell popular CDs below SoundShop's wholesale cost, making it impossible for the music specialty retailer to compete on price for mainstream releases. Simultaneously, the consolidation of music distribution meant that independent retailers lost much of their advantage in obtaining hard-to-find titles. Major distributors began favoring large chain accounts, offering better terms and faster delivery to retailers who could guarantee minimum order quantities that SoundShop's individual locations couldn't match. The company's attempts to negotiate better wholesale prices were hampered by their status as a regional rather than national chain. While SoundShop had 180 locations at its peak in 1993, competitors like Musicland operated over 1,300 stores and could leverage their size for significantly better terms from record labels and distributors. The mid-1990s brought what should have been a renaissance for music retailers. The grunge explosion led by Seattle bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden created unprecedented demand for alternative rock, while the rise of hip-hop opened new markets and demographic segments. SoundShop was perfectly positioned to capitalize on both trends, given their strong presence in the Pacific Northwest and their historical expertise in underground music scenes. However, the company's financial position had deteriorated to the point where they couldn't fully exploit these opportunities. SoundShop's debt load from their rapid expansion meant that cash flow problems prevented them from stocking adequate inventory during peak demand periods. Customers began to view SoundShop as unreliable, often finding empty shelves where popular titles should have been displayed. The company's reputation for customer service also suffered as cost-cutting measures led to reduced staffing and the elimination of many part-time positions filled by music enthusiasts who had provided much of the chain's credibility with serious music fans. By 1995, SoundShop was facing a crisis that went beyond mere competition or market changes. The company had accumulated over $12 million in debt, much of it to major distributors who had extended credit during the expansion years. Several key suppliers, including Warner Music Group and Sony Music Entertainment, placed SoundShop on credit hold, requiring payment in advance for new releases. This cash-on-delivery status made it nearly impossible for SoundShop to maintain competitive inventory levels, as their working capital was tied up in advance payments rather than being available for rapid response to market demands. The company began closing underperforming locations, shuttering 23 stores in 1995 and another 31 in 1996. Each closure further weakened SoundShop's negotiating position with suppliers and reduced the economies of scale that might have helped them survive. The closures also created a negative perception among customers, who began to view SoundShop as a failing retailer and shifted their purchases to competitors they perceived as more stable. The emergence of online retail in the mid-1990s represented another challenge that SoundShop was ill-equipped to meet. Early online music retailers like CD Now and Amazon's music section offered vast catalogs, competitive prices, and the convenience of home delivery. These virtual stores had minimal overhead compared to physical retailers and could offer deep discounts on popular titles while maintaining extensive selections of obscure releases. SoundShop's management recognized the threat but lacked the financial resources and technical expertise to develop a meaningful online presence. The company's website, launched in 1997, was primitive by the standards of the time and offered only a fraction of their in-store inventory for online purchase. More critically, SoundShop's existing debt burden and cash flow problems made it impossible to invest in the technology infrastructure and fulfillment capabilities required to compete effectively in the digital marketplace. While their competitors were building for the future of music retail, SoundShop was struggling to meet payroll and keep their existing stores operational. The final chapter of SoundShop's story unfolded rapidly in 1998 as a combination of factors made continued operation impossible. The company's largest creditor, Alliance Entertainment Corporation, filed a lawsuit seeking immediate payment of $3.7 million in outstanding invoices, triggering similar actions from other suppliers. SoundShop's attempts to negotiate payment plans were unsuccessful as their deteriorating sales performance made creditors unwilling to extend additional time or credit. The chain's same-store sales had declined for 4 consecutive years, falling by 18% in 1997 alone as customers migrated to big-box retailers, online stores, and the used CD market that had emerged as a significant force in music retail. SoundShop's management explored several potential solutions, including acquisition by larger retail chains and partnerships with online retailers, but the company's debt structure and declining market position made them an unattractive target. The final blow came when their primary bank called in a $4.2 million line of credit that SoundShop had been using to finance inventory purchases. Without access to credit, the company could not stock their stores for the crucial holiday selling season. SoundShop officially ceased operations on December 15, 1998, closing their remaining 127 locations and laying off over 800 employees. The company's liquidation sale drew crowds of bargain hunters, but also longtime customers, mourning the loss of a cultural institution that had introduced them to countless artists and albums over nearly 3 decades. Many former employees went on to work for other music retailers or opened their own independent record stores, carrying forward SoundShop's commitment to musical discovery and customer service. The timing of SoundShop's demise was particularly tragic, as it occurred just as digital music piracy and file sharing were beginning to devastate the entire music retail industry. Had SoundShop survived another few years, they might have found themselves competing on a more level playing field as even their largest competitors struggled with the challenges posed by Napster and other peer-to-peer networks. Instead, SoundShop became an early casualty of the retail consolidation and technological disruption that would eventually claim much larger chains like Tower Records and Sam Goody. The company's story serves as a reminder that in rapidly changing industries, even businesses with strong customer loyalty and deep expertise can be overwhelmed by forces beyond their control, particularly when financial constraints prevent them from adapting to new competitive realities.